Hey, we are live. It is HAMTAG guest follow-up. We've got Matt the Greek with us. Hello, Matt.
Hi, speaking to you from lovely Livonia, Michigan, which
Woohoo.
in 2012 was named the second worst speed trap city.
Oh,
They
really?
caught me in 2010.
Now, see, you're going to open that up before, well, real quick, and then I'll come back to speed traps. So this will be, we're going to hopefully have some more commenters coming in a little bit, or guests coming in on the comment side. But what we'll be talking about is the fans' top 5 1 hour ish games. So we've got their list and I've got a little thing queued up. So we'll be going into what the fans commented on YouTube based on our last show, Matt.
Great.
But I've got a curious question for you. Having been in law enforcement for 26 years, never been a traffic guy or anything where I'm writing a ton of tickets, but I've written my share. See, speed traps I always considered were those tricky ones, like where they change the speed around a corner and it goes from 60 to 40 or something. Whereas what we do is we'll even get on the media and say, hey, on the highway, the speed is 60. We've got people doing 80. We're going to have cops up there, so keep it at 60.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more, but not much more. And then we'll have a bunch of cops come up, and then people go, it's a speed trap. I'm like, man, we don't try to trap you. We tell you. But what is your, so you had a speed trap location, or that was you were the capital of it. What was going on? Was it trickery?
There's a lot of that speed changing. And in this particular case, I did not see a speed limit sign. So I should have slowed down to 25, but this was a kind of a quasi main road. It was not really a residential section because north of the next main street, it was a 40-mile-an-hour zone.
Got it.
And then when you got north of the freeway, it dropped back down to 25, even though it was not. So they caught me.
Okay.
Caught me trying to do 40 going up to there. And so, I learned my lesson.
Well, we have Magnus. Magnus is in from Sweden. So I like when Magnus comes in. Yes, I do the little Sweden thing. I'm sure it's not correct. It's just me kind of poking fun at Magnus.
Well, good evening to you, Magnus.
And then we've got Anthony. How would that be? Salvaggio? Good to see you, Chief. Nice hat. Thank you. This is my little boonie cap. This is my OD. I've actually wore this when we were doing some training when I was in the Army down in Fort Polk, Louisiana, I believe.
Well, that'll be a name that has to be changed.
Yeah. I think that was it. Let's see. That was a NTS. No, what NTSB? That's the aircraft deal. What are we doing? There was they used to do this big joint thing. They even have German paratroopers were flown in for this huge exercise we did. All right, everybody's coming in. Let me do a few more name things. And then just so we know, before we get into the fans list, let me pull this back up. What we are going to get from Matt, we're going to get how Matt started in the hobby. So get ready for that, Matt. Kind of your first games that brought you in. Matt was in 1978, he was present for a softball game where I believe Tom Shaw ran down what would have been a home run softball hit by Mark Herman. We'll get your version of that. And then I've got to see here, you've listed there was a Jim Dunnigan autograph experience. So we'll get to you on that one as well. So let's see who else is in here. Trevor Just has popped in. We've got Dan, the board game man. Hello from New Brunswick, Canada. Well, hello. Anthony said, it's like Joe DiMaggio. So it's Salvaggio. Awesome. Anthony Salvaggio. Perfect. See, I've got to do that with Brun Sheen. That's my last name. And I'm always saying it's like machine, but Brun Sheen. And then they get it. So I'm with you, Anthony. Sorry. Let's see. Magnus. Good evening. 1,800 hours where he is. 6 p.m. Excellent. Viper Dave is in. Magnus, he eats paratroopers for breakfast, especially the German ones. We actually had a friendly fire deal with the German paratroopers. It was very interesting to see how that went down. We were using all the Miles gear, which is the laser gear, but they were coming through a point in our lines, and we were playing this indigenous personnel, and we had an actual real SF team that had linked in with us. I was actually, I'll digress. So as a medic, I'm in the headquarters section of our light infantry company. We're occupying this village that they'd set up, huge, like live gaming simulation here. It's a real ville. They had pigs, they had chickens, you could tell they were military personnel that were playing civilians in whatever. We're supposed to be the Cortinian make-believe army, and we were the militia. And well, first of all, the best cup of coffee I ever had was our commo guy wakes me up at like 2 a.m. to do my radio watch. Hands me, I'm sure it's a cup of Folgers crystals or whatever that he did on his little camp stove. But he like gently woke me up, handed me this cup of coffee, and I was like, oh, this is so good. And then told me when we had to do a freak change, and I'm sitting there just staying awake, and all of a sudden this SF guy sits up, Warrant Officer Forrest, just sits up. I don't know if his watch was on vibrate. I don't know how he did. And he gathered his rucksack and he goes, all right, I'm going to set up all these beacons for these paratroopers that are going to drop pretty soon. And then he just walked into the jungle, kind of. It was like a jungle. And I'm like, oh my God, if I would have gone 100 feet, I was lost. And sure enough, I started hearing these C-130s, and when you can't see where they're coming from, and it was a little bit moonlit, and then all of a sudden you could see a couple of the planes coming through, and you could see their sticks, the airborne guys coming out, and they were below tree line in 6 seconds. And I was like, all it made me think of was, wow. Now I know D-Day was crazy and they didn't have nearly as organized a drop, but I thought, man, what were the Germans thinking when these guys were dropping it? These were like friendly troops for our deal we were doing, and it was still like, wow. So it was very cool. And then the SF guy comes back about 2 hours later, just walks in, and I'm like, how do you do that? And he's like, what? I'm like, how do you set up your stuff in this mode in the middle of nowhere? And I'll come over here and do it right. And he goes, well, this is nothing. We do it in like combat zones. I'm like, good point. Good point. So, there's my little side story. We will get to the fans list. We didn't have as many fans chime in, but let's get to first, Matt, how did you start? What was the first game, and about how old were you, and what brings you into the hobby originally?
Okay. What brought me into the hobby was a new kid on the block. Steve was about, I'd say, 2 years older than me, or a year and a half older than I was at the time. I was about 12 or 13. He was about 14. And he showed me this game called Midway. And he taught me, this is what this is what those numbers mean and all that. And I was picking it up, or trying to. And so we played a game, and he wiped the wall with me. I mean, it was, I did everything wrong that you could do wrong. And
were you the Japanese?
No, I was the Americans.
Okay.
And so I sent out I was thinking like I don't know, maybe like a surface battle type of thing rather than an air battle. And so I spread them all out, and I couldn't find his for the longest time. When I saw that they were all concentrated, I said, oops, I got to try and concentrate all mine that are spread out. So from that experience, I lost, and I lost terribly, but I still liked it.
You bet.
And then, as I recall later, or just before I played that, I read my dad's American Legion magazine, and there was an article about Torpedo 8 in that magazine. That was the Yorktown torpedoes planes that first came upon the Japanese. Everybody got shot down except for Ensign George Gay. And so there was a tie-in that way. And then about a year or two later, I bought my first game, Avalon Hill, Jutland, on the day of its release.
Yeah, Dunnigan's game.
Dunnigan's first game that he designed for them. and I grew my collection after that. And also, we had a couple other guys in the neighborhood that were kind of interested in the Avalon Hill games. There was Bob, and I can only imagine what his father or his grandfather might have thought, that he wanted a copy of Africa Corps for Hanukkah. But Bob was, he was into history, so it was not like he was glorifying the Germans. He was studying them, as it were. And Rick across the street, his dad was a fireman, and he also got into some of the games with us that we would play over at Steve's. And Steve and his father must have been really ambitious. They built on a 4x8 sheet of plywood,
right,
a facsimile of the Midway grid, only expanded to the entire Pacific Ocean.
Holy moly.
So you had China and Japan on one end, US on the other end, and all the other little islands in between. And he was going to play like this giant double blind game. He had in his mind that he was trying to figure out everything. And probably an even more monstrous game than the monster games that we're used to seeing now, like War in Europe, War in the Pacific, and that. I mean, we thought that Jutland was pretty, ambitious in terms of, okay, we needed this much floor space, or at least something close to that in terms of playing it and getting down on your hands and knees as opposed to leaning over a board.
Right.
And we played one game at Jutland. We played until about 4 a.m. and walked home.
Well, that's cool. I like that. Now, real quick, Trevor has on here, in case we all forget, well done, Matt the Greek. Enjoyed seeing you on the show.
Well, thank you, Trevor.
Yeah, it's definitely a pleasure having you on. Now, so that gets you in. You've got to tell the story, because I remember when you mentioned this, I had Mark on, and of course I did all my interviews with Tom and Shawn, and did my two little parters there. But so tell us the story about 1978 and kind of put us in time and space, and then talk about you were watching their softball game, right?
That's right. And I want to go back a few more years, if I may, because
of course,
how I got involved in the entire Origins thing. In 1975, Avalon Hill advertised the first Origins National War Game Convention at Johns Hopkins University. Gotta remember that S. The chancellor one time was invited to Pittsburgh to Carnegie Mellon, and the guest or the host mentioned that he was from Johns Hopkins University. So he says, "It's great to be here in Pittsburgh." He dropped one S on them too. So
there you go. Yep, Johns Hopkins.
Johns Hopkins. So I convinced a couple of buddies to go with me, and we would use my little gremlin. But hey, it could hold up.
Oh, we're getting a little bit of lag, Matt.
Okay, we're back on.
Yeah.
And so we went to, well, actually, one guy had to drop out because he couldn't get the weekend off to go there. So it was just Dennis and I, and we were college students at the time. We were in our senior years, or just about in our senior years. And we drove the 10 hours or so down to Baltimore from Detroit. And like I say, I never saw so many war gamers in one place at that time. There was about 1,500. And I remember playing TSR's Dungeon game, the board game, until about 4 a.m. Several games trying it out. And then we drove back. But I also remember when I was waiting for a tournament to start that I was entered in, somebody mentioned that that the Metro Detroit Gamers had finished hosting a game convention back in June, and that they were going to host one in the wintertime in December. So I made a mental note to check out the favorite local game store, and I did find a flyer about the event. So that was the first time I'd ever heard of Metro Detroit Gamers,
Hmm.
and went to the first convention in '75 December. That was a winter con, and enjoyed myself. They had like 250 people there, so it was good size, but not so big that it was like you were lost. And I found out that they held a lot of Saturday meetings at various rec centers. The public library, one of the public libraries had a meeting room and such. So every Saturday I had an opportunity to play, and uh, I got in to be good buddies with the top four people in Metro Detroit Gamers. Paul Wood and John Vandergraff were nominally like vice president and president, respectively, and Bill Summers and another friend of mine, Mike Bartnikowski. And Mike was affectionately known as either Bart, because that was short for Bartnikowski, or
Sure.
Mikey, because Mikey could eat anything. And Mikey was a pretty big guy. And eventually we settled on calling him the Colonel, because that's an honorific that Kentuckians use a lot, especially for horse auctioneers.
Hmm.
And Mike was our chief auctioneer of used games, and that's where I picked up a lot of my collection.
Hmm.
And he was also kind of known as a one-man press gang. He'd greet you at the various meetings if you were new and got to know you. And he eventually, when it came time to sign up people to volunteer for the convention, either in one respect or another, either to GM games or just stand guard over the desk and admit people and so on and so forth, he would twist their arm until they'd volunteer. So memories of those early days. And then um, there was a movement, by Paul in a very subtle way that I can now see after all these years, that he saw our growth in the attendance. And so for the following a year after that, this would be December of '76, he invited as guest of honor Gary Gygax,
Nice.
Brian Bloom, and his brother, Gygax's brother Ernie, to come to the convention. And in the wintertime, WinterCon 5, I believe it was. And that was the first weekend in December of '76. And we had about 425 people show up, despite the fact that we had a fairly significant, I wouldn't call it a crippling snowfall, but a fair amount of snow that would have maybe deterred lesser spirits into coming. And Gygax was so impressed that, we drew that many people in crummy weather and we ran it so smoothly, because he was running Gen Cons at the same time as well. And so he was very impressed with us. Then the following June, we invited Avalon Hill to come to the convention. And I think Gary may have come back as TSR because it was a good sales thing for him.
Sure.
And from Avalon Hill, we had Tom Shaw, Randy Reed, who was the young designer up and coming at that time, and the Richard Hamblin, who was kind of a developer designer of Magic Realm, among other games.
You bet.
And so they got to see what we were doing firsthand. And we had like about 700 people show up for that convention. And so when Paul and two of the other big four went to Origins '77, we put in a bid to do Origins '78. the fact that we had two of the major manufacturers already see what we could do, and we did it 2 times a year, meaning we didn't just burn out after one con and then restart everything again. They said, okay, we'll go with Metro Detroit Gamers and Origin 78. And we started working on an Origin 78 as soon as he got back. But then in between Origin 78 and Origins was WinterCon 6. And this one is, okay, I got to get my orientation straight here. Okay, our special guests in the 77 was Jim Dunnigan, Howie Barish, and Richard Berg.
Sweet.
From SPI.
Sure.
So SPI got a little bit of a foretaste of what Origin 78 could be like, and the group that was doing it. I'm sure it was a relief to them to see that it was a capably run convention. Now, that was the one I missed because I was over in Germany. So Paul saved me that program book so that I could have a memory of that. And so that brings us to Origin 78 in Ann Arbor, the North Campus. And yes, it was hot. Yes, the exhibit hall wasn't air conditioned. But then again, people only paid like $8 for the whole weekend. I mean, Origins, I don't know what it is nowadays, 80 or $90 for the whole weekend, or something like that. So, yes, it's air conditioned. Yes, it's big and spacious, and we were just, an amateur group, if you will. We were only just trying to break even. We're not trying to get rich off of it or anything of that nature. Sure. And so we held Origin 78, and this is the program book from that. Let me see. Yeah. We had an amateur artist who is quite talented, Paul Jacques, I believe his name is pronounced, and he came up with the cover.
I like that Corsair coming off the carrier there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And we were the first Origins which really, really emphasized miniatures as a co-equal branch with board wargaming and RPG. Now, prior to that wonderful softball game, there was a bit of trash talking, if you will, in the press. Well, what press do I mean? He says. I hope I have it here.
So, of course, this is trash talk between Avalon Hill and SPI.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. I hope the glare isn't too much.
All right. We'll see. No, that looks good.
This is from Moved magazine. The cover says SPI Team Triumph, Spybat Smash, CBS 10, 13, and 9, and 7. Herman smashes Grand Slam. Worden's towering triple furnishes victory and margin. This is their Central Park League that they were playing in, and they were trouncing CBS. And I think they made most impressive hit was the towering Grand Slam drive in the third by Hulk Herman. So this came out about a month before the con, maybe 2 months. And then that was followed up in Moves magazine, and there was some talk in the Avalon Hill General. And this is okay. This, excuse me. This is Mark Herman from his backside, and you could tell he's a pretty athletic, muscular. Well, somewhat muscular. Softball player.
He had a lot of hair too,
and he had a lot of hair back then too. And he said the caption was, "Just one good hit, God, and I'll behave for a month." And then in the lower corner here, you have Tom Shaw.
Yes.
And Tom is captioned as saying, MVP, me, but we lost.
And then that Mark again with his right hand up. Is that Mark again there with his right hand up?
No, the hand up is I can't remember who that is.
Got it.
I think it says somewhere in the magazine inside, but it says, "I swear I'm going to Harvard, and yes, I'm responsible for proofing Objective Moscow." So he was one of the SPI staffers.
Got it.
And Origin 78 itself had 3,600 people attending, and we had about 200 volunteers handling all the duties of, from admission and everything like that.
Now, so Trevor's letting us know that Origin 77 was many years before he was born.
Well, so is 78. 77 is when we put the bid in.
Right.
And up to that time, Avalon Hill had run it twice. SPI had run it once, and I don't think they had any intention of running it again if they, could get out of it somehow. So our bid was kind of the only one that was somewhat legitimate. So in the, I don't remember exactly how the defenses were laid out, because in softball you can have 4 outfielders. And I think Avalon Hill went with 3 regular outfielders and a short rover. Okay. I think SPI lined up 4 outfielders at standard outfield depth with a left center and a right center outfielder, as well as the traditional left fielder and right fielder. Tom Shaw is playing left field.
Okay.
And the only way he ran it down was that Mark got under it just a little bit. It was towering. It was very, very high, very well hit. And it almost was like, Willie Mays in the 54 World Series. I don't think Tom had to make an over his shoulder catch, but he ran it down because he had time, because gravity was with him in terms of it's going to take a while for it to come down.
And Mark said that he said that little guy was fast.
And he was quick, and there were no fences at the field.
Yes, Mark mentioned that too. Had there been a fence, he said there's no way he could have ran it down.
And so it ended in a 13-13 tie. Everyone, of course, claimed their side won.
Sure.
And the most telling moment, I guess, of that game has not been remembered or documented too well. But when the game ended, Randy Reed suffered a low blood sugar event.
Oh, really?
He started getting disoriented, and he was hypoglycemic. So fortunately, somebody had some orange juice or juice of that kind, or some sweet regular sugar pop, and that got him to the point where he was functional. But that was something we hadn't even thought of, making sure that we, again, nowadays with most insurance companies and everything like that involved in some of these events, they make sure that stuff like an ambulance or a first aid team is on hand to handle any of those. I mean, we're 20s. We're in our 20s. We think we're invincible.
Hey, I remember 79. I was riding my Schwinn bike with the banana seat, and no helmet was even, I think, invented.
You're right.
There were no helmets on bikes. What are you talking about? Maybe if you were on a motorbike, you might throw one of those little ones on there. But yeah.
So how do you handle an emergency situation like that? That kind of thing didn't even enter our minds. What if somebody trips and sprains an ankle or whatever? What do we got to do then? And there were no cell phones back then either. I don't even know where the nearest payphone would have been to make an emergency call, because Ann Arbor was not my hometown. This was done through the grace of a grad student in the psychology department. He was kind of our lead in terms of working with the administration, lining up the space and everything like that. So that got me into Metro Detroit Gamers. I was kind of like number 5 through number 10, somewhere in that portion of the batting order, if you will. And
now look at that. So Trevor just with the Schwinn bike, and you missed the banana seat, man. The banana seat was hot. I meant you could
No.
even carry a passenger if need
Now,
be.
wait a minute. Wait a minute. Okay, you were 9 years old, so
Sure.
probably you were small enough to do a 20-incher.
There you go.
At your
Yeah.
present size.
Oh yeah, big old. Yeah, I was smaller.
When was your growth spurt, I guess?
I was always tall. And it just kept going. I actually remember I was always back row center whenever we did the school photo.
Sure.
Back row center. I'm like, yeah, I know where I'm going. Everybody's trying to tell me where to go. I'm like, sure, I know exactly where I need to be. I always wanted to be the little kid that got to sit on the front row in the chair and put his hands in his lap. Because they got the full body. All you ever see of me is some kind of
shoulders up
head thing. Yeah, there ain't nothing going on. Meanwhile, you got full body shot down here. If you're one of these little fellas, I'm sure Tom Shaw was getting his, he's right up front, maybe even holding the sign for 4th grade or whatever.
Yeah, he's about 5'6". He's a little shorter than I am. 5'6" to 5'8". I'm not exactly sure how much taller I was than he was, but that's what I recall.
Got it. I actually had now this is totally side story and we've gone way off and we'll get to the list in a bit, but I was doing I was doing a critical incident stress debrief. We had a pretty bad incident that happened in town here, and it was a whole nother bureau precinct that was involved in it, but I run our team that deals with critical incidents. And so we were meeting, and after we met, we were at this one chaplain's church, and one of his teachers, because they run a little like a church school out of there as well. Let me get this off. She's talking to the chaplain. He's our lead chaplain. And then she turns to me and says, "Hey, Bart, haven't seen you since 5th grade." Well, 5th grade is not here in Wichita. I was in the mountains of Colorado in a town, Evergreen/Conifer, at a little school called Marshdale. And I said, 5th grade, that was Mrs. Hill's class. She's like, yeah. And I'm like, what? And then we had a whole little I went back in time for about 20 minutes as I talked to her. So, yeah, matter of fact, I don't have it. I don't think I have it. No, she had on her phone, of course, she pulls up and says, "Look, here's a Facebook group. Here's your picture." And where was I seated? Back row center, baby. I wasn't seated. I was standing. Now, hold on. Vorpal had something with a banana seat here. Vorpal says, "I had the purple Western Auto bicycle with the banana seat, elephant ear handlebars. Wow. And a 3-foot tall sissy bar." Look at that.
Oh, wow.
So, what else we got? Oh, wait, no tassels. He did not have tassels on there, though. I bet he had a bell, though. He had one of them little, he had one of those little bells on there, I bet. That's what I'm calling out, Vorpal. Now, that's some of the fun and some of the great nostalgia. I mean, I'm an 80s kid, so what, Stranger Things, when that came out. Now, I didn't have a group coming over and doing all the role playing, but I remember my son was watching some of them and he's like, "Why would that kid just leave and go on his bicycle?" I said, "You would call and say, 'Hey, Mom,' or whoever answered the phone, 'I'm headed home from,' for me, it was Jason's house." Or Mom would say, "Don't let the sun set without you getting home." That was all the instruction you had. And then 2 was she would come out and just scream your name. And within the block, you better be able to hear it and come running. Is this strike? I mean, that's how it was. There were no tethers. I remember running around with no shoes on. Mom would be like, "Where are your shoes?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know where they're." I think I left without them.
We survived.
Yeah, right. We survived. I think I left without them. I remember watching the street. It was actually here in Wichita. I was probably 6. They were out putting asphalt down on our street. And we're watching it, and they're literally just doing it. We're sitting there, and I remember thinking, that looks hot. Well, then I had to touch it. That was a easily learned mistake. It was like, oh, my God, it sticks to you. It was just a finger, but my buddy, who was like a year younger, was like, "That looked dumb. I didn't know why you were doing that." I'm like, "Yeah, you won't do that twice." There you go. There's the lesson. Don't do it twice. All right. Sorry. So you saw the rundown. Let me see. We had one more thing. And then we will jump in. Let's see. Oh, you had a 2-game do-over, and then you listed Origins of World War II and Empire of China.
Right.
Oh, we'll mention that, and then we'll get the Jim Dunnigan autograph, and then we'll go into the list.
Okay. For those who have never seen it before,
Oh, hold on. Let me get you full screen. What is this?
This is
Ooh,
Emperor of China. This was an $8 game back in the day. Secondary market prices now are around $20 or less.
okay.
Um, it covers a period of ancient China, which is called the Warring Empires. And at first glance, it looks kind of simple and easy, and it's kind of like a little bit like Risk, but it's all in one country. And you're resource limited, and it can accommodate 5 or more players. They only have pieces for 5, so if you had a 6th, you'll have to dig up a 6th color of something to act as his pawns and pieces and what have you. But the game plays fairly quickly and is doable in an hour for 4 or 5 people, especially because you have the game end with a drawing of the Heaven Mandate of Heaven card.
Wow.
So that comes up, and when it comes up, game over.
That's it.
It isn't like you have to play through the entire deck.
It's like you quoted Aliens there for me for a second. Game over, man.
Game over. Right. Then the other one, so named after the convention, or at least so many people think.
Sure.
Origins of World War II.
There you go.
This was another Jim Dunnigan design. And I bought it back in 1972 at E. Dalton booksellers.
I love it.
And the knock on that game is that everybody plays the first 5 of the 6 turns trying to make sure that Germany doesn't win, and then gang up on Germany. So Hister and the Nazis don't have a chance of winning.
Got it.
And
hey, let me do a Vorpal shout out here. So Vorpal mentioned while we were in there that if I didn't look stupid enough on that bicycle, I wore a coonskin hat. Daniel Boone was my favorite TV show. Me too. I had the flintlock Daniel Boone rifle. I had the flintlock wooden pistol and the coonskin cap. And I roamed my block ready like I lived in Kentucky back in the day.
Well, now, see, when you mentioned coonskin cap, I go back even further to the Davy Crockett coonskin cap.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Back to Origins of World War II. I think it's a very underrated game. Okay. And we played it in college in the student union. We had usually a ready game for 4 or 5 or more players, and we could do it in the 1-hour break.
Real
classes.
Wow. So this would have fit your 1-hour game list back in the day.
Yes, because we got so proficient at it too. Ooh. And the shortcomings were overcome by a couple of simple optional rules that are in the game rules themselves. You can play the game with upside down units, and you have 4 dummy units, 4 blank counters that you use as dummies. So you can place them on the board upside down in the turn order that's specified, and then you flip them all up, and then you figure out what's a real battle or not a battle.
Love it.
That's the old fog of war, limited intelligence portion. The other way that we sometimes played was that you wrote down the turn number and where you were going to place your units. So those all got revealed at once. Execute the orders, then figure out any combat, if anything, and any victory points that accrued. Again, it was another way of limited intelligence, not forcing one player, like the United States player always goes first, and they always have the weakest hand. So what do? And Germany's last to play and has perfect information in front of them in terms of where do they go and what they do. So introducing that fog of war, limited intelligence, I think really adds to the game. Now you have to play it the standard way a couple of times so that everybody understands what's going on, and then you can break in with the optionals. And if time had permitted, I was going to try and compare it with the new games that cover that same period of history and see where they stand on the time continuum and so on and so forth.
Interesting. They got Trevor taking a shot right across my bow here. Dummy units were nicknamed BART units. Look at this. That sounds like a Vorpal comment, Trevor. That's a Vorpal. We're going to call that a Vorpal quib.
You still want to be co-host next week?
Oh, yeah. He'll be on. That's a good point. Before we go too much further, Trevor will be on next week. And next week, we're going to be talking about what we're looking forward to in 2021 war game wise. And mine will be what I'll call the dummy list. That's what I'm going to call it. Hold on. Vorpal had something here. I once played diplomacy with an engaged couple. Uh-oh. That's a problem. The game ended with rage and drama when she screamed, "Now I've seen your lying face." Oh, my God.
And that's a 7-hour exercise, no matter how you try and time it.
Yeah. That guy needed to just let her get him. He'd be like, "I trust you, baby." All right. Let's see. Hold on. Now we got to do one last thing. Tell me about Jim Dunnigan's the autograph experience, and then we will go into the list because I'm loving this. Where you're at, what you're talking about.
Okay, Jim Dunnigan and I had a very brief conversation at one of our conventions. At that time, I was writing a couple of game programs for the Radio Shack TRS 80, affectionately known as the Trash 80 computer, and he was sitting there talking with me while we were playing the game, and he was discussing things like Genie and other things that he had gotten in touch about in the about 1979, 1980 timeframe, and that the future was going to be in computers. Now, the next time, I may have seen him at some of the intervening Origins at that time, and then the next Origins that Metro Detroit Gamers got to run was in Origins 83 at the Cobo Hall Convention Center, which is the big convention center downtown Detroit. In 1980, it hosted the Republican National Convention, and Ronald Reagan was nominated to be the presidential candidate, and George H.W. Bush was nominated to be the vice presidential candidate. So Origins 83 was also going to be a highlight because that was the first time Jim Dunnigan was going to meet up with Charles Roberts, who originally started the Avalon Hill board game company. And so that would have been a moment to see. Unfortunately, about 10 days before the convention, I had an accident in my car. I turned left. Yes, I got a ticket for failure to yield. And got run down by a 1972 Pontiac boat.
Wow.
And I think it was a Bonneville, and I had a 1979 or 1980 Dodge Omni, which was a subcompact.
Yeah, because earlier you said you had a Gremlin, right?
Right. I had a Gremlin, and then I traded up to if you will, a Omni. And
the AMC Gremlin, baby.
Yeah. And so the guys at the con took this banner paper, okay, and they passed it around to all the dealers, wishing me good health and recovery and so forth. And
so you got injured?
Yes. Oh, very much so. I spent 10 days in the hospital.
Holy moly.
Yes. I cracked like my entire rib cage on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
And I had a fractured ilium, but the doctors took the x-rays, interpreted them, and said, you don't need any surgery to correct your broken bones. You just have to take it easy for a while. And so I don't know if you could see this in red.
Yeah, we got it. Hold it a little higher. There you go. Look at that.
Jim Dunnigan. And he said, this is God's way of telling you you're working too hard. time to change religions. Well, Jim, I didn't do either of those. I got more religious, but
There's some kid wanting to know probably why didn't the airbags go off?
there weren't none of those.
I know. I'm just throwing that in because some kid will be
exactly.
like,
They're so used to these airbags and side airbags. I think that model car didn't even have door reinforcements.
Yeah. Vorpal wants to know if it hurt and did you cry?
No, I did not cry. I was unconscious most of the time.
There you go.
And when I woke up, I was in intensive care. I couldn't see a thing. I don't know if my mind was just still in blackout mode or what. And I could hear my mom talking to me, my dad, my sister-in-law. Everybody was talking to me, but I couldn't see them, or I didn't. I was so groggy. I guess maybe I was, I don't know what kind of painkillers they put into me right after the accident and such. So,
Goodness.
But so I missed that great moment. I had that to fall back on as far as memories of that convention, and also somebody they got a copy of Ambush.
Ooh, yeah, baby.
They expanded my game collection to include Ambush, and that's what I played a lot of when I was recovering.
Now wait, Ambush didn't come out till like 83.
Yeah, this is 83.
Oh, okay. All right. 83, 84. Got it. All right. Cool. So you were jumped in. Jumped into Ambush.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe a little too hard.
Now it's funny when you mentioned the Trash 80. I had just finished on Audible. I had this like 44-hour book on Lincoln the Prairie Years, Lincoln the War Years. And I was like, whoo, I need something sugary sweet and just fun after that, which is good. I love my Civil War stuff. I've been getting deeper and deeper, but I had Ready Player One, which is all this 80s throwback. Some of it's a little bit, it's weird. It's dystopian millennial fiction, which is hilarious because from the 80s, it was all like Red Dawn, apocalyptic stuff, Mad Max, Road Warrior. The Ready Player One has a dystopian millennial type deal, but the creator of the game, and the book's been interesting so far, hid some stuff on what he called the trash. It was hidden in the trash. And of course, this kid playing the game in this book says, well, that's the TSR, or no, it's the TRS 80, right? The Trash 80. And I was like, so as soon as you said it, I'm like, wait, I know what that is, just because of Ready Player One, the book. So what's Vorpal got here? Ambush is legendary in this chat room. Yep, I can't mention it in any of my lists. So Ambush is off there. That and B-17 are on my retired list. All right, well, let's jump into what the fans had listed. So real quick, you keep an eye on, especially Vorpal's comments if they come across. I'm going to full screen something Trevor gave me here. And in order to manipulate it, I need to come up here. And I'm sure there's a better way of doing this, but I've got Shawn Morrin. So Trevor helped me out, put this in a PowerPoint, and he's listed so everybody can visually see it as well. But I'll call it out because a lot of people just listen to our show while they're doing other things. So Shawn Morrin's list, again, this is the top 5 fans list for 1 hour-ish games. Now, if I remember right, reading Shawn, some of his follow-up comments, he says number 5's Hammering the Scots, but that's because he loves it, but he gets beat so bad that it's usually over within an hour. So Hammer the Scots, number 5. Julius Caesar, great cover. You can see it's got like a centurion with his regalia and his breastplate armor and everything with his short sword, number 4. Crusader Rex, number 3. Car Wars, very coolly, number 2. And then something I had not seen, which I think everybody can see it fine, I'll zoom in, is Eagle Day, the Battle of Britain. Decision Games was his number 1.
Now that's a new folio game with Decision Games, and I have it. My biggest complaint is that it's a square grid. and all the movement is distorted that way. If it were a staggered grid or if it were hexagons, I would agree wholeheartedly, full blown, because anything to do with the Battle of Britain, I'm in it to win it. You know what I mean?
Love
I've
it.
got a very big collection of Battle of Britain games.
Love it.
And
Did you see where GMT's getting ready? Forget the female designer's name, but she's doing it's based on the Solitaire Storm or Skies Above the Reich and then Storms Above the Reich. She's doing a Battle of Britain version. Did you see that from GMT?
I did, but I haven't. I don't recall the designer's name.
I don't either, and it hasn't. I think she's getting close to being hitting the P500. You can tell it's going to get made. But here's Chalk Boy 8. So Chalk Boy 8, if I remember from his comments, he said he doesn't have too many games that would be over in an hour, but he included Memoir 44, of course, part of the what I call the Borg system, and Gunslinger, which is one of the best covers. I love this cover, the angle of it. It tells you everything in a shot. I bought it. It, of course, has the micro time game thing where, drawing or click or cocking the hammer back. I've wanted to play this. I've tried it a few times, had a buddy over, and he was like, this is weird. And we never played that again. But there's a guy that I guess runs it usually at BGG that has some like shootout scenarios that are supposed to be pretty cool, and he walks everybody through the rules. This would almost be due for an upgrade. I would love to see it come out with maybe a few of the more modern day twists to it, maybe move it along a little better. Did you ever play that, Matt?
Gunslinger, I may have looked at it again. And as far as maybe advancing the cult of the new, I guess I have just received, or I am due to receive, my Kickstarter on the new Cowboys 2.
Okay.
Worthington.
I've got the original Cowboys. I've got that. How did they change to the Cowboys 2? Do they upgrade?
Oh, I'm trying to remember now. It's so
that's all right. That's all right.
Enhanced, more character definition. And now I also see there's a guy that's on Kickstarter selling a Western. See, they didn't make Worthington. That was a redo on them for their Cowboys 2.
Okay.
The first time they did Cowboys 2, they were going to include miniatures and everything like that, and it drove up the cost so much that they couldn't get enough interest in it. So they pared it back, and they kickstarted it a second time, pared down a little bit, and it got through, and now they're in the process of shipping. Beautiful. There's another Kickstarter, and I cannot think of the name of it right now, that someone is doing a similar topic, and they're including, like, I think 8 miniatures.
Really?
I'm thinking of just supporting it just to get a hold of the miniatures and put them in the Cowboys too.
Nice. Now look, we got Vorpal here through his list in almost in an illegal format, but we're going to call it good because he put it in underneath the comments of this show. His 1 hour games are Naval War card game, Nuclear War, sorry, I did it my Western style, Guillotine, that actually is kind of a fun game with an author.
It is.
And Family Business. Good one, Vorpal. He also throws in Enemy in Sight a little bit later. And then a little Kabuki. Hold on, I'm trying to click on it. Kabuki's in. Hey, Chief. So Kabuki's in. And Gang. And Interesting Idea. And then Magnus had Battle of Britain co-designer. Gina Willis. There we go. Thank you. You don't know how close I almost just said Bob. That's how close I was. I had to like shift my brain because I'm thinking Bob. I am one of the worst people with like all of the acronyms. It's not even acronyms, but all the shortness. Like even B-17 Queen of the Skies, when you've got the capital Q and then
Mhm.
OT small, and then Sky. I'm always like, what is that? And so I'm terrible on that. All right, let's see. Let me roll back in. Now I'm going to have to click back over to here. So we're going to roll up from Chalk Boy. Here is Forrest Cole. So we'll, of course, come to his honorable mentions in a second. Now I'm looking, and I'm sure I don't have this in the proper format, but I cannot fully read number 5. What is this? Conrad Operation? I think it's
Operation Conrad.
I've never heard of this. What is this? Do you know this, Matt?
I've never fully heard it. I think I looked it up, and I think it's a Battle of the Bulge sub battle. You know what I
Okay.
mean? It's not the whole campaign. It's a specific area. I'm not familiar with the area. It's something fairly new and from a small publisher to boot, probably as well.
Got it. Well, I love it. We definitely have the winter camo. We've got the tiger there. So very cool. And then we can see number 4, Gunslinger. Again, we just covered that. Number 3, Ogre, which is great. I've got the grand, giant, super huge box of Ogre, and my son has been saying, Dad, we got to play that. I'm like, yeah, you're going to love that. So I've actually got to get that played. I had that out on the table the other day, but he was just looking at it. We've got to play it. I've got to get through my curse game from my C3I. We got Victory 2, number 2, and then number 1, he likes the Shores of Tripoli, which we talked about, because that from Fort Circle Games, that's a brand new game that the owner of the company actually creates the company and designs it based on the fact that he'd read the Thomas Jefferson Tripoli, what's it called? Pirates? It's not. What is it? I'm missing the title on the book. Barbary Pirates.
Barbary Pirates, yeah.
Yep. And then I went and read the book based on that. And it's a beautiful game with some card-driven CDG, and it plays very nicely. Totally got me into the history. And I've always been a lover of the USS Constitution, and I've toured the Constellation. I'm assuming it's still in Baltimore. Now, as honorable mentions, I guess I jumped to Tripoli. Screaming Eagles, Dogfight, Ace of Aces, U-Boat, Broadsides. Lovely. He's got that Screaming Eagle, that Dogfight, and that Broadsides, which were huge. I've actually, out of those, I only have Screaming Eagles. Very nice from Forrest Cole. We'll slide down. There is a Trevor Just list as well that I'll get to in a second, but I'm going to have to jump around. Ian McGregor. So his number 2 is, again, Memoir 44. Popular deal
Sorry,
here. Say again. Uh-oh. Got a little lag. It might be what I'm doing here. Well, we've got 1942 USS Yorktown. I just love that shot. That's a great board.
Oh, yeah.
Looks good. All right, and we'll come down here. Oh, that's the end of that list. So let me come back over to just you and I. All right, and then let's see. We can come over just to this for a second. Hello. Let me see what we've got going on here. Chief Ugly. I have a bomber movie recommendation for you, Shadow in the Cloud. Wow, 2020. All right, I'll go look at that. Kabuki has Ogre was my introduction to war games. Granted, it isn't historical. No, but I love the asymmetry of it. The many against the one and working against it. And it's a great teacher of the CRT and shifting along the columns, which is huge. And then what do we got here? Sergeant Chief had to do the back cover for Op Conrad. No problem at all. Cover would get demonetized. Got it. Okay, so the front cover must have had a symbol on it, I would imagine. So let's see. Oh, it has some nice one. Love Awful Green Things. I like that too. I picked that up.
That's a good one.
Yeah, the game stands up fine today. It does. I like it. It's this kind of cheeky, fun little game. And then Vorpal, what is this? You will never think of bombers the same way again. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to have to go watch The Shadow in the Cloud, and I'll never think of bombers in the same way again. Now let's see. I'm going to have to pop back from this. I think in order to get into, hold on, I'm going to go bring up Trevor Just list. So I'm popping around here a little bit. I don't believe it's being shared. But I've got to get to the comments to get Trevor's list up, and I'll probably just read it real quick. Boy, I did not have that ready, and I should have. Let me jump into the comments, and I'm getting there. There we go. Okay. So we've got Trevor Just, and I'm just going to read this off. We've got his number 5. He's got a great list, 13 days. It's a CDG game, Cuba. I was hoping my wife would enjoy it, and it was kind of an introductory into what CDGs do. Didn't work so well, but that's all right. 4, PAX Pamir. I have the second version of that. It's so pretty, and I love what all the PAX series do. Infamous Traffic, very good. I've seen that, not played it. This Guilty Land and 1775 Rebellion, and of course we have the honorable mention High Treason, and Pavlov's House. Now let me come back in here. I've eyeballed. Oh, let me go this. Sorry, should have been full screen, double screen. I've eyeballed Pavlov's House, but it looks odd to me. I know it's this weird deal where you're defending the house, but I don't know.
Well, it's part of the Stalingrad battle. Right?
It is, and I love
house to house, room to room, practically.
Yes, and I love that.
Tactical.
Yes, I love tactical, and I love Stalingrad. Stalingrad is so just the War of the Rats, the pain of it, the idea, the meat grinder that was going on. So I know when I say I love Stalingrad, again, people that don't know history are kind of like, what? And but you know. That conflict.
Enemy at the Gates would probably be a good movie to see.
Yes, very
Gives
good.
you the real feel.
Oh, he says it's basically a state of siege game. Okay, well, that's interesting. Interesting. Kabuki ad, what did she have here? What was that? Was that the Blitzkrieg is short, but a war game is a very abstract way. I must have missed something. I saw a comment.
I think she's commenting on your selection.
Oh, got it. Got it. All right. Let's see. Trevor's basically state of siege. Good. 13 days Cuban Missile Crisis. Yes. Pocket-sized game is 13 minutes. Very good. Very good. What are we at? We're in an hour and 2, so we're going to get ready to wrap up. That is the comments. We didn't have nearly as many comments on this one, but good comments. I love the history, Matt the Greek. That is awesome that you were there. We're talking, I don't get into the war game hobby until 1983. I was loving, so 6th grade, I actually think I'll probably do a Chiefs vlog on this. Running into this gal, Jennifer Wilmot. I think it was Huff at the time, and my family just came home, so you might have kids run around soon. But it totally took me back because 6th grade is Mr. Rybold's class. And I, at the time, thought reading, this is funny, I'd been forced to read Charlotte's Web with the class.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, my 6th grade head said, reading is for girls. This is a girl's book. I don't like it. I don't like this Charlotte's Web thing. Well, Mr. Rybold had a reading worm that was a construction paper circle that he'd drawn like a face on. And what he did was, and this is my gamer intellect at work before I knew I was a gamer, he said, if you read a book, you can come up and give me a verbal presentation, book report, and I will write your name in big letters on another construction circle paper, and we'll add it to the worm. And the idea was to get that worm to go all the way around the classroom by the end of the year. I love that idea. That's a gamer type of idea. You know, you get your name up on the wall, you're reading, you're giving a verbal report instead of a written report, which I don't think and then I thought, I bet you there's no books that I'm going to like. Because at the time, I can tell you what I hated was our English book was those textbooks that had all these little short stories written by who knows where, you know, I mean, and I couldn't stand the way they were set up. I don't know why. I still don't like them to this day, those little blips of whatever. But he said, hey, I've got a box in the back, and you can look in there, and there's some different books in there. And what I gravitated to was this yellow covered Revolutionary War soldier who looked like he was running with a musket, sideways shot. And the book was called My Brother Sam is Dead. So I was like, dead? What's going on here? And it was written by the Collier brothers. And I can remember this vividly to this day. I told this gal, Jennifer, this. She's like, how do you remember all this? And I said, it's vivid because this turns me into a reader. This book turns me into both realizing I love history. That was number one because it was Revolutionary War period. And this is the first book I read where I felt like I was the character and I could get the history. The short of it is Sam, my brother Sam is dead. Sam was the older brother of this 12-year-old, 11-year-old kid. It's Revolutionary War is going on. Sam steals the family's only musket, the only rifle, and he goes off to join the Continental Army. And the part I will always remember is the young son now is helping dad get like their crop of wheat or whatever. He's taking it to market, and they're halfway to where they're going to go to their aunt's house where they're staying or something, and highwaymen attack them. Dad gets hit over the head, and the son, which of course would be about my age, has to get the wagon to the aunt's house by himself, and it's a snowstorm going on or whatever, and he gets there. I don't know why I'm going off on this, probably because of running into this classmate. And he gets there and he wakes up. So he basically passes out from exhaustion and probably freezing, wakes up in front of the hearth. He's wrapped in a blanket, but under the blanket, he realizes he's naked because he was probably soaked. And I remember reading this and pausing going, oh, who took his clothes off? And then the character says, oh my God, who took my clothes off? And I'm like, oh my God. And of course it was his aunt and his niece and his cousin who's about his age. And I'm like, oh my God, that would be terrible. And then he's like, oh my God, I can't believe my aunt and my cousin have seen me naked. And I'm like, oh. And I was suddenly inside the book, inside the history. I was very intrigued by what was going on. And his brother ends up, I believe, getting hung by the British as a traitor. But I remember after finishing this book in record time, unbelievable for me, I go to Mr. Rybold. It was not library day. And I go get with him and I go, hey, I know it's not library day, but I finished this book. I gave him my presentation. He put my name up on the wall with the worm. I said, could I go to the library? I'm figuring there might be some other books there. And he was like, I remember pulling his little tray out, quickly scribbling off a permission slip. And I remember thinking, and he hands it to me and says, yeah, go to the library. And I remember I never went to the library by myself. So I was like adrift. And I wandered in, went to the librarian and said, I read this book. And do you have anything else? Of course, what Mr. Rybold was recognizing was I was actually classified as a slow reader. What I did was I hated reading. And all of a sudden I'm asking to go to the library. So I went in, and then the librarian takes me over to kind of Hardy Boys stuff. And I'm checking out Hardy Boys books and I'm ripping through those. And then that leads me to post-apocalyptic stuff in the dime store, drugstore. So, and off I go. And then I turn into a total World War II nut, reading everything I can. Remember, I think it was Random. Was it Random House that put out all these little books on World War II?
I believe it was Random House. Yeah, I think I have a couple of them on the Carrier War and stuff like that.
Tarawa, one of the first books I pick up, they had this unbelievable cover of that dock that went out and the Marines wading in under fire. And I'm like, I didn't even know how to say Tarawa. I'm like, what is this? And I bought that and then read how these guys hit the reef and how they had to wade in for hundreds of yards under fire and wait. And I was like, are you kidding me? And then knowing it was real, and I was like, I've got to know more. And boy, that just led me down the historical road. So, here's Sergeant Rock. Sergeant Rock was actually a comic book series I was into as well. And I loved Combat on TV. Did you watch Combat, Matt?
Combat, Vic Morrow, Rick Jason. I watched it a lot. And 12 O'Clock High.
Yeah, I did not get into 12 O'Clock High, and you would think I would. Vorpal says everything I said explains a lot. That's a compliment, I'm sure. Aunt and cousin is nowhere near disturbing as seeing an aunt and cousin naked. Yeah, you wouldn't want the flip side, but him being basically knew he'd been undressed. And I remember thinking, oh my God, that would be terrible. What is this here? Do you have an idea how much model kits cost today? And then it was $60+ Really? I remember them being fairly inexpensive back in the day.
Depends on the scale and the size.
Yeah.
Car models, the classic 1/25th scale are probably still around $25.
Yes.
And they keep reissuing some of the older ones too, because the tooling's paid for, so it's
perfect. Kabuki, we did read Charlotte's Web in class. I got all the way to the end. And that one didn't do much for me. What was the Algernon book? That was the first book that was real deep. Flowers for Algernon, I think I read in like 8th grade or something, and I was deeply impressed. And my son just read that actually as well. So
I think I remember reading 30 Seconds Over Tokyo.
Oh, yeah, I read that too. Yep. When I realizing how they launched early and how they're dumping MGs over the side and trying to lighten their weight and how they caught a tailwind and all that. I mean, I was like, holy moly.
And I remember the post crash escape.
Yes.
To avoid capture, because again, the Japanese were not too friendly about prisoners of war.
Totally. That, and I remember there was one of the guys that survived because the Chinese saved him. When they crashed, I think he broke his collarbone or something in 2 places, and they helped him. I just remember thinking, I think he was strapped in and they landed so hard that he broke his, if I remember right, his collarbone and both sides, and they had to patch him up and they got him, but they had to move him by stretcher as they were trying to escape the Japanese. Yeah. The stories, just once I found these books, I was, and then the games are like, now I can step in, and that's what I still say today. You can go in and play history. Flowers for Algernon was both a short story and a full novel. I think we had probably read the short story in school, I would bet, but I don't know. It might have been the novel. I just know I loved it. Yeah, the Charlie movie was good too. Yeah, after we read it, they then played that. I think you have it right, but yeah, I know he misspelled. So perfect. All right. Well, I think we're good. Matt, thank you again for coming on the show. Is there anything you want to throw in there? I just kind of went off there at the end.
Well, if you can keep it brief, I guess, what was your first convention experience like? Or where was it?
I think, what was my first convention? Growing up in Colorado, I didn't do any conventions. I was reading in the General how there was a group, or some guys were meeting down in Denver, but I lived about 45 minutes up in the mountains. And this is before I could drive. And I remember thinking, oh boy, I'm not going to go down there. And I remember thinking I would be the only kid. I'm sure that would have been wrong, but I was under this impression there were very few kids at my school that were playing these games. And I was kind of an oddball. And I don't mind, as you can tell, I don't mind being the oddball. I already stood out height-wise. And I was an avid reader, and I didn't shy away from it. I remember some of my buddies would be like, why you always got a book? And I'd be like, I love reading. And they're like, that's stupid. I don't care what you say. I love it. I'm spending my own allowance on it. That's how addicted I am to reading. And of course, like anything else, the gift of that was realizing that I knew who I was as far as reading, and I didn't care what anybody said. I love to read. And of course, the second you own it, everybody else around you is like, yeah, he just likes to read, or anything. Or somebody else would come up and go, why are you always reading a book? And my buddies would be like, he likes reading, leave him alone. So it was like the more you own anything, the more it doesn't matter.
Just froze up.
Oh, sorry. Yep, you're froze too. So hopefully it'll unfreeze here. So my first con might have just been, I think it was just one of the BGGs, or I did go to a WBC in 2000. 6 or 7.
Oh, wow.
And then I did an Origins with Tom and the Dice Tower about the same time because I never did the con scene. And then when I was doing the Dice Tower with Tom, I remember he said, "Hey, come to Origins. We're going to run a booth. We're going to see how this works by running a booth." And I can't remember. I was doing there was this card tactical combat game. I can't remember what it's called. The same guy.
Commander?
No, it was more like almost like video game guy. He did Puzzle Strike and he did something else. I can't remember the name. My son still loves it. And I ended up teaching it at the Dice Tower booth. It wasn't a war game. I'm blanking on it. If anybody knows, Puzzle Strike was the where you reached in the bag and instead of chit drawing, you were drawing your stuff out of there. I can't remember.
Right. I think I have that one in my collection somewhere.
But Origins, that was my first Origins, and that was just so much fun because I was meeting all these people that I'd only seen, on the Dice Tower, some of these other shows. And that was probably it because I was always like, well, I would look at Avalon Con, but being in Denver, it seems so far away. And I remember thinking, well, okay. And then, and again, so yeah, I'd guess WBC and Origins, those in 06, 07, 8-ish were probably the first ones. So that would be me. But
okay.
Cool. Let's see. What do we got here? Vorpal had a couple things here. Vorpal's was Gen Con 76. But he says it's at the Playboy Club. What is it?
That's true. That was in Lake Geneva.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's one advantage Gary Gygax had. He had a great site to go to if you're interested in that. Yeah, of course, we were interested in that, but it's kind of, like I say, it's, yeah. And, okay.
I had my own style too, stood out, I think. So that's Magnus in Sweden. Yeah. That's, I would say that's definitely the, well, I used to, on this, it's just in my head. For a while there, I hated that I was tall for a bit, not for long, but for a bit. Cause I would have people say their first thing was, "You're so tall."
Yeah.
Or, for a while in high school, no matter what I ate, I was 6'4" and 175. So I was skinny, kind of lanky, bony. And I hated the word skinny. And then I remember, I think I was in my junior year and somebody again and said, "Wow, the first time I saw you, I just thought you're tall." And it started to bug me. And then I thought, hold on a second. That's not bad. I mean, I would hate if the first thing they said was ugly or Vorpal will jump in or stinky. God, you wouldn't want the first.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to be known that way.
Yeah, you don't want to be stinky. So I started to go, you know what? Tall's not bad. I think I'm going to take tall. And skinny's not bad, although I hated it at the time. And then I was like, why am I even bothering with this? Because it's like reading. I didn't care if somebody said, why is your nose always in a book? And then I would go off about how great the current book I was reading was, and they would move away. Or somebody would come up and go, "Hey, you know what? I like to read too. And I saw you reading a World War II book." I'm like, "Yeah, I love it." And they realized no need to hide it under a bushel. If you like to read, you like to read. So now Magnus says he's short. He's 5'2". Wow, I wouldn't have guessed that.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
I was thinking 6'2". Give him a whole foot. I bet you Vorpal's probably 4'9". I'm just saying. Anybody that web aggressive is probably like a little shorty guy. Just kidding, Vorpal. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. All right, I better get out of here. If I'm offending Vorpal, I'm going down the dark end right there.
Well, remember,
yes,
you don't grow old by playing board games. You grow old when you stop playing board games.
100%. I love playing in history. Love it. And I own up. Vorpal says he's 72 inches. I'm terrible with inches. What is that, 4'9"? All right, just kidding.
I'm only 70 inches tall, so
there you go.
Towers over me, yeah.
There you go. Well, Matt, thank you for coming on the show.
You're more than welcome.
Hearing your experiences there with the early part of Cons and the gaming and Dunnigan and seeing the near home run hit run down by Shaw. I could picture it, but you saw it. So way to go.
Well, thank you.
You bet. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I like it. This is what I like. All right. See you guys later. Hang on the line there, Matt. And I'm going to end this.